So we have arrived at the end of season 1 of The Last of Us. And we get to uh, stuff that I knew was coming because I knew spoilers for the game. Although, reminder, I didn't actually play the game, not past the first couple of hours anyway. I get motion sick from full 3D games at this point. It's only gotten worse as I've gotten older. So this was well handled for what it had to do. It was actually very cool, and I only knew this because, I was like, that actress looks familiar, who plays Ellie's mother. And the thing is, I don't know if I've actually seen her in anything, but in checking her IMDb, I did find out she was Ellie in the games. That was cool. That's just cool. I don't know if they actually explain why Ellie is immune in the games. I'm not entirely sure it's necessary because there's part of me that thinks like it adds to the I don't know, the sense of we have a miracle that we can't figure out to not know why. But on the other hand, I suppose the specifics in this case are so specific, and it requires such an incredibly narrow confluence of events that the odds of this having ever happened otherwise and the child having survived are basically nil. So I suppose it's not that big an issue in terms of, removing that sense of her uniqueness. I guess it just emphasizes specifically why she's unique. I personally didn't need that, but I guess it ultimately doesn't hurt things. And it's an attempt to add a little bit more weight to Marlene for what she's gonna do. And I mean, I guess I have to be honest, Marlene is not a character who's done a lot or meant a lot to me. Like, she's fine. She's fine. But I am gonna go out on a limb and suspect you spend more time with and around her in the games than the show does. I don't really felt like I got to know her. She was keeping the characters who I did get to know at arm's length the few times that I've seen her. So, giving me a little bit more insight into, her background and her damage is not uninformative. I don't think it altered too much of my um, overall assessment of what was going on. I mean, it's there to paint a more direct contrast between her and Joel, establishing that she does have a reason to care about Ellie, not necessarily to the same extent or for the same reasons as Joel does, but like she does have a personal investment. So she doesn't see Ellie as just another, just an asset to be used, which would have been the case with someone she had no history with. So it does work in terms of contrasting with what Joel ultimately does. It just didn't do much to impact my actual thoughts on her as a character, if that makes sense. It's, what the front end does, captures really well, is that awkward sense of growing apart from your own child. Now, the circumstances under which this is capturing a pretty common parenting sensation are very heightened and very unique and, obviously very horrible. Ellie is coming off of a deeply traumatizing event, and it's changed her. And Joel is trying to relate to her in the ways they've been able to relate to each other before, and it's not quite working. Ellie's not rejecting it, but it's clearly not the same as it was. It allows for a microcosm and a sped up version of something that happens very genuinely to most parents. Your kids get older and you don't know how to connect with them as much anymore. You know what used to work and you try and latch onto that, and maybe there's still something there, but it's not the same. And you haven't figured out how to build a newer bond, and maybe you won't for the person that they are now, because in reality, the thing is they just become older and become slightly different people, and might require different interactions, whereas in Ellie's case, she went through something deeply traumatic. But the end result still captures that feeling, I think, very well. I like that it starts out more on the, well, after the flashback, starts out a bit more on the calm side. I think that was a good way to go because it, I mean, I knew where it was going, but it has the potential to lull you into a false sense of security, other than the fact that, it's The Last of Us, something's going to go wrong. Now, Joel and what Joel does. Here's what I really like about it in terms of how it's depicted. You understand why Joel makes the choice that he does. Because not only from the bond that he has with Ellie, we get in this very episode a real confrontation of how bad the loss of his actual daughter, Sarah, hit him. And that he tried to end it and failed. The last time he lost, and Ellie is effectively his daughter now. That's the relationship that they have. The last time he lost a daughter, it completely destroyed him. And he knows and remembers how badly it did. And he views Ellie as having saved him and giving him something worth living for. And he can't lose that again. It makes sense that he did this. That he would rather let the rest of the world burn than not have this connection in his life again. And the thing is, these kinds of choices made by characters can really put me off a lot of times. For some reason, the ending of Cabin in the Woods puts me off. Where, spoiler for that movie, I guess, basically the entire world ends because a couple of teenagers had a nihilistic moment. And I hate that for actually more complicated reasons than that by itself, but I don't like that. I get why they made the decision, but part of why it didn't work for me in something like Cabin in the Woods is it's presented just plainly. And I get the sense that if the narrative as a whole has any feelings about it, it's on their side, which I'm not okay with. What I like about this is that this is not presented as something righteous, as something cathartic, as something heroic. It's not shot like a thrilling action scene. There's not a lot of spectacle to it when he starts shooting up the hospital. There's very melancholy music. The show recognizes that while what Joel is doing makes sense, and you get it, and you empathize, and you might even find yourself thinking, I might do the same thing. The show is not going to frame that as the right thing. It's not necessarily inherently condemning that action. I do think the show is judging him for something that he does a little later. I'll get back to that. But that choice that he makes, which is a culmination of how brutal we have seen him already, that he can be, and funneling that into ensuring that Ellie lives, even if it means that there can't be a cure made for this thing that is ravaging the world, has and continues to ravage the world. You get it, it makes sense, and maybe I'd even do the same thing. But he's not a hero. It's not meant to be something that you cheer. Something that is meant to just sit with you and make you go, oh my gosh. Leaves you with that feeling of empathizing with a character even as they do something that is going to do so much long-term damage. That's a tricky thing to balance. And while I will say that I think the show does a good job of deliberately not presenting it as a good thing, it doesn't necessarily overly judge Joel for saving Ellie. It judges him a little, but what the show does judge him for, and I think rightfully so, is lying to Ellie. Because when she comes to, he spins this whole thing about how there were other people who were immune and they couldn't make a cure from them. So there was no, we might as well, let's leave. Let's leave. Sorry, it didn't work out. Let's leave. As opposed to the truth that he knows that she is quite possibly completely unique. Maybe they could have made a cure, but it would have cost her her life. But he isn't holding back the truth to protect her. He's doing it to protect himself. Because he is afraid that Marlene, when she said to him, if Ellie knew what this could mean, she would probably decide to volunteer and do this. First of all, it was easy for Marlene to say that because they didn't ask her to volunteer. That was a rationalization on her part and the part of the doctors who were about to cut open into a child's head. It was their rationalization. She probably would have volunteered anyway. Yeah, but you didn't give her the chance, did you? But the thing is, she might be right. Rationalization or no. Now, even if she is right, it doesn't make it okay that they didn't ask her to volunteer. Of course, they were going to make her if she didn't volunteer, but, at least the illusion of agency is nice to offer somebody. And as I said, she might be right. And Joel is terrified. He is terrified of that possibility that Marlene might be right, and he won't even allow that to be possible. He won't give Ellie the choice. While in regards to the outcome on Ellie's life, Joel has done the opposite of what the Fireflies were going to do. They were going to kill her. He has saved her. In terms of her ability to choose, her agency, he took the same thing from her that they did. Deprived her of information so that she could not make her own choice, and depriving her of that information and removing that choice from her specifically because he and the Fireflies already knew what they wanted, and their want for that was more important than her having the freedom to say no. So when I say Joel did to Ellie what the Fireflies did to Ellie, I'm not talking about the physical thing. I'm not talking about her life, but I'm talking about robbing her of choice, robbing her of options, robbing her of the ability to have the information and live her own life. Now, in the case of the Fireflies, they were going to end her life. In the case of Joel, he is funneling her into the life that he wants them to have. When I say they did the same thing, one can have a debate over whether it's on the same scale. And obviously, the threat to Ellie's life is very different, and that does change things. But fundamentally, he has stolen her choice. And the show does seem to judge him for that. That is wrong. Because it is. Whatever rationalizations he has, that it's to protect her, he doesn't want to hurt her further. If she finds out and gets mad and leaves him, she's in danger. Dude, you don't get to decide those things for her. I know the relationship you have, but she's not your daughter. And even if she was, for the age she is and what she's been through, She has a right to know. Because she's seen all the horrible stuff. She's seen it all. You're not protecting her. You're protecting yourself. Here's the thing. I know there's a whole other game. And I know they're working on a whole other season based on that game, I believe. I would say this is where the story should end. The ending of making the point that Ellie kind of suspects that he is lying to her and that he won't own up to it, and leaving that where it is, I think that's a really good place to end, because it leaves the possibility of consequences to Joel without us having to necessarily see those play out. And those consequences being that eventually she does find out, or her trust in him just keeps eroding to the point that this is going to break anyways. Will that happen? Definitely. Based on this ending, you can't tell. But it's the kind of open-ended thing that I feel works very well. Because whether she believes him or not, whether she stays with him or not, isn't as important as what he did to her, and indicating that she at least has an inkling. That is what is needed for this story, for this ending note. And if I didn't already know that there was a second game, which I know far less about the story, I know a little, but I don't know as much about it as I knew about the original. But now knowing that there's going to be a second season, my initial gut instinct is why? This really does feel like a really good ending point. And I don't know. I can't say I'm pumped for the idea of a second season, because this feels like it ended perfectly well. Really well, actually. So, yeah, I think this is good. It isn't a 100% misery fest, but it's very mixed. It's very gray. It's very, boy, none of this is clean, is it? Which is fitting for this world and these characters. So I liked it. I mean, to the extent that you can like something this dark, but it's really well done. I could see myself watching this season again. But it doesn't necessarily leave me wanting more. We'll see. The Last of Us. Finale of season 1. What did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills and enables me to do this as my living. Like, share, subscribe also help me out, but don't worry too much about it. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can come on back next time you need a break. This video wouldn't have been possible without my supporters over on Patreon, and I would especially like to thank Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfullah, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Ruth, Oliver B., Ulrich Bogdan, Melinda Walters, Imudelki, Leotha Boyd, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Bernabe Lax the Poodle, Robin Powell, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Tim Price, Adam R.D.L. Taylor, David Hall, General Contact Unit Problem Child, Shayla Gourlay, and Rosalind Bennett. Thank you so much.